sensors there. You can't record it through GPS. However, it would be possible to, let's say, drop cheap cockroaches with radiation sensors over an area and track their dispersal again by the amount that they're picking up and the speed that they're turning, and track their movement via GPS. And well, again, theoretically, the dispersal of the cockroaches themselves would match the dispersal of the radiation. And that could be used for, I don't know, any other scenario. Again, that's more difficult because, let's say, oh, you wanna have the dispersal of like some sort of toxic substance or whatever. Then you're sending cockroaches in for toxic substance, and you have a whole bunch of different variables such as height and stuff like that. Did you originally had a question? What was your question? Did you have a question or no?
Yeah, but it was about Hall effect sensor range.
Yeah, I wouldn't use,
Okay.
I mean, I could go and make sensors that were more sensitive. I would just want to go with other sensors if I could. Any questions or good? Okay, and again, one of the main purposes of this was just to demonstrate that it's possible to create an artificial sensory capability in an organism. And this idea itself, I did this with cockroaches. We have stuff out there, for example, cochlear implants that are connecting human beings to machines. It would be feasible to do, obviously not the same exact methods, but it would be feasible to use electrical microstimulation in order to generate artificial senses in other organisms. If I wanted to continue this project, I would probably move on to mice, because I don't know, has anybody here taken general psychology?
No, but I know some mice.
Uh-oh.
The Mises, yeah.
But basically, if you've taken general psychology, you would have heard, there's a good chance you would have heard about an experiment in which they took mice and they implanted electrodes into pleasure sensors in their brains. And if the mouse went to turn off a switch, it would get a shock and it would feel very happy.
We're getting Mises high.
But then maybe you want to close your ears for this one.
All right, get on with it.
But then what they did is they put down an electrical grid, separating the mouse and the switch. And they put the mouse there, and if the mouse were to walk over this grid, it would get shocked and it would feel pain. The mice themselves would actually still walk over this grid in order to get that stimulation.
Fucking addicts. Oh my god. Right.
So if I created a device, for example, that went and it would, yes.
Wait, yeah, so this is possible with like brains and mice. It's not only limited to like ganglia with cockroaches?
Yes. This specifically, now this is one stimulation. This is like one baseline. It's like analog. It's just boop, boop, boop.
Okay.
It sends that stimulation. But what I would want to do again with the mice is, if I did pretty much like exactly this and I just had one thing going in, the mouse isn't going to react. But if you were to include like some sort of, I don't know, DCU or something that would stimulate the pleasure sensors of the mouse when the mouse received input from a sensor. Let's say I tried to do, give it a magnetotaxis or whatever. If the mouse is going over a surface and the sensor on its right detected a field or whatever, and the cockroach turned correctly, have the device apply the positive stimulation, so it actually trains the cockroach to respond, the mouse, to respond to the field. Now that would be mice, because mice, you can definitely teach mice, they're intelligent, but it just might be a simpler way. If you were to, for example, implement this with rescue dogs, it would be to, I don't know what simulation you want to give them, maybe, again, heat, audio, or responding to specific things. But if you would train them that when they get a certain signal to respond a certain way. So for example, what if you could, I'm trying to think. This is original as I'm talking now. Give me some examples of rescue. I mean, you have the blindness ones, but
You could give it a positive stimulation when it smelled drugs, so it would seek drugs out.
you could just train
I don't
them
know,
to
like they're
see
bomb,
the
a
drugs.
bomb,
Maybe
they
it's-
smell like diesel fuel.
See, I think it'd be fun to teach the cockroaches kind of like an electric fence with a dog. Like you put a bunch of magnets in the ground and you have the cockroach like follow a path. And you do it enough times that now you can have these cockroaches marching in like formations to your living room.
That's originally how I was gonna test my cockroaches. I tried to make this like a surface and put neodymium magnets underneath it. It didn't work. I think if you've got the system working right, but it was just a mess. It just made the thing, and then the cockroaches went here and then turned all the way here, and just cockroaches don't like to listen, so it's easier to have each trial isolated. But if you could get the system working effectively, then you probably could get them marching a little. So, any other questions, or
Yeah.
I'm like
One.
getting towards the end?
One last question.
Yes.
Theoretically, could you like implant this in humans and just have like a button that's like a drug? So basically, you push a button, it just releases, like, or just stimulates your pleasure center in your brain.
Well, I guess. Oh.
Probably be pretty haggard though. Probably do a lot of damage to other parts of your brain. It's pretty deep in there.
Yeah, you don't want to put it into the wrong area and
Well,
start
I mean, but you
spazzing
could-
out or hallucinating.
You could like do it if you did it right. It could work.
Yes, I suppose it could work.
If you don't see Harley for 30 minutes.
That's the next big thing.
All right, I think I'm pretty much done. It's just some announcements that are excited. So, any other questions? Okay.
What is the weirdest ethical constraint that you didn't know existed that you became aware of when you said you wanted to do something?
Nobody cares about non-vertebrates.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That,
No,
yeah, no. I had some jokes from like some judges. Actually, there was this one judge he was the one who pushed me through to like the ISIF semifinalist stuff. But he came over and he's like, "Oh, so I heard you're killing cockroaches over here," and I'm like, "No." But again, like, it's funny. You have to do so many different forms. If you're doing anything with a vertebrate, it's crazy complicated to enter into a science fair if you have a vertebrate. But if it's a invertebrate, non-vertebrate, then you really, people don't care. Which I feel bad because I named all of these. This is a picture of Maya. I'm not kidding.
Okay, what are the names?
Maya. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember all the names. Oh, I had like 7. I should know this. I have them written down somewhere, but there was like rocks and like black. I don't remember all of them, but they're all like one syllable except for Maya. But funny thing, one thing that I did learn during my first year of research. This was a 2-year project. My first year of research was only working on connecting one antenna to a magnetic field sensor and showing that you could cause that stimulation. My second year was about really implementing 2 that could be set on its back and could create a magnetotaxis, which is responding to direction, etc. But during my first year, right around the science fair, I did the operation on one of the cockroaches. And I put the cockroach down, and it was the next day, and I was going to do testing. So I went and I released this cockroach, and the wire popped off. Now, I couldn't anesthetize it, because if I anesthetized it, then I wouldn't be able to do the experiments. And, like, the science fair was in, like, 3 days. So what I did is I picked up the cockroach, and I started, like, trying to, like, plug it back in. And these cockroaches, people freak out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this cockroach is going to eat me, it's going to eat me." And I've always gone and been like, don't worry, they're harmless, they're so much smaller than you, they're creepy, but they can't do anything. This cockroach bit me on the back of my hand and drew blood.
And that's how the play started.
All right, so any other questions? Or?
She said that you were primarily originally working on this for sort of navigating mines. How exactly did that, didn't you say this is the original project was for that?
That's what sparked my interest in it, because there was other research out there where instead of paying so much money to create a small robot,
Right.
create several sent little cockroach unit instead, but sorry, continue?
So you wouldn't actually be using the magnetic sensors to have this thing navigate through a mine. That was actually good. I was wondering how you would make that happen.
No, not magnetic, no, that was because my school didn't like me, but, no, they didn't want me blowing up the place or whatever, but, yeah, no, I would wanna do probably, heat sensors, audio sensors, attach a gyroscope so you could really track the movement, and then once it picks up, let's say you release the cockroaches, and this one over here goes down 15 feet, and it detects, 90 degrees or whatever, then have that send the signal back, and you know that there's a person somewhere in this area, and the cockroach went in this direction. Any other, yeah?
So the reason you would use like cockroaches rather than a robot is just like cost? wise?
Yes,
Okay.
just cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out, is where the break-even point is for complexity of a cockroach robot. Because I feel like if you're going into a mine or you have any like sufficiently like complex sensor, that's gonna start to drive up money.
Right.
Just like the sensor, and so like, I don't know if you did any study in like what like complexity makes it so that like, yeah, let's just build a robot because we can get it back every time.
No, and that's a specific, the reason why, the reason why, the reason why, insect robots haven't even been implemented in my classes is because of how expensive they are once you send them in, and the fact that you have to do maintenance on them, and that the majority of the time you're not gonna be able to get at least a few of them out again. These cockroaches, my device specifically, everything was purchased from Radio Shack or cheap sensors ordered online. I actually think about the sport. Say something about the sport in a minute. But for me, it costs probably like under $1 or under $2 out of all the stuff I ordered. If it was an industry doing it, and if you're sending in that many cockroaches, hopefully the idea is that you don't need so many sophisticated sensors. You could just have sensors in order to, it's kind of like doing a little bit of a sampling of an area. Checking here, checking here, checking here, checking here, and hopefully you'll find the Easter egg, which is a person trapped in a rubble. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm thinking just like the cost of even just like a radio is going down